Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone in New Zealand. My name is Dan Hudak. My company is Hudak on Hollywood. We are a group of lecturers throughout the United States. We do lecture in person here in the United States, but we also do Zoom. And Zoom, as this call is an indication of, allows us to connect worldwide with other individuals. So as I am leading the program today, here's how I'm planning things to go. I'm going to introduce myself, introduce all of the lecturers who are on board with us today, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about lectures that I do. I lecture on classic films, and then I'm going to hand it over to my lecturers who's with us today, allow him or her to discuss his or her programs. We average it out to about 2 to 3 person, and then we'll open it up to questions that you may have after each person has their session, and then again in the chat, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat as we go. So allow me to introduce the Hudak on Hollywood clients who do lectures for the company, starting with Moore, Colorado, here in the United States. Is an expert on classical music and opera. So Betsy, you're terrific. I met Betsy at Opera Colorado. She was giving a pre-show talk. I thought she was absolutely brilliant, encyclopedic knowledge. I brought her on and she's done wonderful. Rich Knox is a longtime New Yorker. I recognize the New York accent when he talks. He has been profiled in Newsday, among other publications. He has spoken widely throughout the country, including in South Florida, where I got started. He is a pop music and Broadway expert. Speaking of Broadway, Charles Troy, a former graphic designer who is also a Broadway expert. And trust me when I tell you that you have not seen a program on a Broadway topic until you have seen Charles handle it. It is interesting. They're absolutely gorgeous to watch his programs. So if you have any Broadway or fans of the classic Broadway shows or even some newer ones, Charles is a great go-to for you. Last, certainly not least, Andy Greenberg, who's a television star for a number of years. I believe he was named Omaha, Nebraska's best dressed man.
Fourth best dressed.
Fourth best dressed. He is a humorous, general interest lecturer, so he can tell you all about how we call them idioms came to be. His lectures, meaning cats and dogs, these famous expressions that we have. He can take you behind the scenes with chocolate. Some of the things that you never wanted to know about chocolate, among many other topics. So Andy will share much more about that with you when his time comes today. But allow me to begin. My name, again, is Dan Hudak. My topic I usually cover is classic films and Oscars. When I cover the Oscars, usually that means when the Oscar nominations are announced in late January, I put together what I call the Best Picture Oscar Talk. It is a look at the 10 Best Picture Oscar nominees. A clip from each film. I discuss why each film was nominated, and I go to the other major categories, giving predictions on who's going to win. I am proud to tell you, New Zealanders, I correctly predicted Peter Jackson would win his Oscars when he swept for Return of the King back in 2003. I correctly predicted Taika Waititi would win his Oscar a couple years ago for Jojo Rabbit. They are both phenomenally talented. That every year. Rest of the year, I'm on classic films. At the kind of core and the heart of what I do is showing clips of famous movies, behind the scenes, the story of production and the enduring of these famous movie moments. For example, I have a clip now, Gone with the Wind, probably the greatest movie ever made, certainly the great granddaddy of them all in terms of Hollywood's best from the golden age. This is the famous Frankly, my dear, damn scene from Gone with the Wind. It's pretty brief, in a minute. What I do is show, and then behind the scenes. Enjoy. So when I'm giving the lecture and I'm showing the clip, I'll introduce the clip and then I'll play it. And then I'll inform the audience that, frankly, my dear, was voted the #1 in American film history by the American Film Institute back in 2005. And then I tell the story of the quote, how in Margaret Mitchell's book that the film is based on, the line is just, my dear, I don't give a damn, how they added frankly for the movie to make it more stern and impactful. And then I show this slide here, sorry, this slide here without sharing. Then I show this slide here. And what this is a list of alternative lines that they were considering using if they didn't get the word damn in this line, because the censorship code in the United States at the time didn't allow the word damn. So the producers had to petition the production code for permission to use damn. And so could you imagine, was frankly, my dear, I don't give a hoot. The core and the heart of what I do classic film lectures is share behind the scenes information like this. And what I'm hiring to do is note of the familiar and then teaching something new in the process. So the note of the familiar comes with the clip from Gone with the Wind, because most people have seen Gone with the Wind. Most people know that line, but they probably don't know the story behind the line. And that's what I'm trying to impress. And I've had great success with these presentations at retirement communities, country clubs, JCC, and rehab centers here in the United States. And I would love to bring them to your residents in New Zealand as well. So that's it for me. Happy to take any questions for me. If anybody does, please speak up, unmute and speak up. No? Okay. Pass it along to who's for Rich. Rich can take over and tell us about his programs.
Oh, thank you, Dan, and welcome New Zealand. I'm in Salt Lake City, although currently I live with my wife and son in Omaha, Nebraska, which I know Andy can relate to. We moved, yeah, we should talk, Andy. We moved from New York a couple of years ago, hence the accent that Dan was referencing earlier. So I've been, ever since I retired as a school administrator in mathematics, I've been putting together programs on the performing arts, including motion pictures, although I'm going to defer to Dan's expertise on that. Lately, I've been focusing on vocalists of the second half of the 20th century, going back to people like Rosemary Clooney, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, who sadly just passed away last week, others like Shirley Jones and Nat King Cole, and even some more current artists who are still fortunately with us, people like Linda Ronstadt and Neil Diamond. We had occasion to visit New York just a few weeks ago and had the pleasure of seeing A Beautiful Noise, which is the title of one of Neil's songs. And it's a tribute musical to him with an actor named Will Swenson playing the role of Neil Diamond. In preparation for this, since I knew that our audience today from New Zealand, I found a clip of an interview with Neil when he was on tour. He did a whole worldwide tour in 2005, and one of the stops happened to be in New Zealand. So I thought I'd share a minute or so of that clip so you could hear him talking about his music and anticipating performing in front of a live audience in New Zealand. Let me just go to my media player and you'll be able to watch the clip that I was able to locate and share with you. Here it is.
Even at the age of 64, when most pop performers are...
You know, I love Sweet Caroline. It seems to be very infectious. Audiences around the world want to sing with me on that.
So you had a chance there to see a little of Neil Joel. Now, that was done 18 years ago. He's currently not in very good health. He's suffering from Parkinson's disease, but he was healthy enough, fortunately, to attend the opening night last December of A Beautiful Noise. And it's great to, revisit some of the wonderful songs, because he kind of broke the mold. I mentioned people like Tony Bennett and Frank Sinatra and Rosemary Clooney. You can count on one hand, on the fingers of one hand, all of the songs they actually wrote. But once you got into people in the 60s and the 70s, singer-songwriters like James Taylor, Neil Diamond, I mentioned a few others, of course, Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen. These are people that essentially wrote their own music and lyrics, as well as popularized them with their vocals. So that's an area of focus that I'm working on, and hopefully you'll be able to take part in some of those programs.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate that. Any questions for Rich right off the top? No, not seeing any. You can always feel free to unmute if you have any questions as we go. Betsy, please tell us about your programs.
Thank you, Dan. And I was most amused by your introduction of yourself, in that you said you like to go behind the scenes and include the stuff they know and the stuff they don't in movies. That's what I do in my talks. And my field is classical music. So Richard and I do not overlap. Not that I don't care about Broadway and pop music, but classical is my thing, Mozart and company. And it's a huge range of things. And some of it we know very, very well. We've all heard, the 1812 Overture of Tchaikovsky. But how did he come to write it? We've all heard Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, bum, 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 bum. We may know only 4 notes of it, but we've heard it. But how did he come to write it? And I do programs on those works and many others from many countries. One thought on that in a moment. And I like to include what the composer had to say about it. A lot of their correspondence has survived. And golly, some of the most famous composers are still around to tell us about their music, such as John Williams, mostly of movie fame, but he's written music for the concert hall as well. And I love to look up what the composer had to say about the piece, what he or she was trying to accomplish. I also love looking back into what the critics and the contemporaries and colleagues of the composer had to say at the time. And there is a surprising amount of that perspective on Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. I say surprising because it premiered December 22nd of 1808, but we still know what the newspapers had to say about it. And it's fun to get that in perspective and then listen to the music to hear the things that the critics are saying. Now, I have done programs on music from nations throughout Europe and North America and some of South America and bits of Africa. But let me point out that Asia is in there as well. And for that matter, the oceanic nations down with New Zealand. And very briefly on that thought, a bit of a screen share, and you should, in theory, once I move the control bar out of the way so it's not in your way, be seeing the name Douglas Lilburn, who lived from 1915 to 2001. I've never done an entire hour-long program on Lilburn, but I could because I have a lot of his music on my shelf. He is a New Zealand composer, he was, and was born in a farm on the North Island of New Zealand, went to London's Royal College of Music to study. An awful lot of British colonials took themselves back to England to study and then came back to their homelands to pursue their careers there. That's certainly what Lilburn did. And much of his music reflects specifically upon his nation. And he made a point of explaining what it was he was trying to say. He wrote his Aotearoa Overture shortly after having returned from Britain to his homeland, and he wanted to reflect upon his nation. And for those who aren't familiar with that Maori word, it translates as land of the long white cloud, and is, as I'm told, and some of you are nodding who should know, that it is a nickname for the nation of New Zealand. And he says he wanted to capture this combination of mountains and ocean and the farmlands and the outgoing spirit of New Zealanders in the music. We don't have time in my 2.5 minutes here to play the whole thing, but I'll play you an excerpt. It's really wonderful stuff, and he deserves much more attention than he's been getting in the world of classical music. So I can do programs on Mozart and Company, and I can do programs on Bella Italia or Latino music, whether from Spain and Portugal or from Central and South America. But I could also do for you a program on New Zealand composers. And Douglas Lilburn is not the only one. He's just the biggest star of the bunch in the world of classical music. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts or comments?
Okay.
Maybe I told you what you needed to know. I hope so. Thank you very much.
Well done, Betsy. Well done indeed. Charles, please tell us about your programs.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. And hello, New Zealand. I am a musical theater historian and graphic designer, and I have created 60 multimedia presentations on musical theater subjects. I'm going to show you a graphic that indicates all the programs that I have. Take a look right there. Let's see, I'm screen sharing, so you should see it. In any case, 26 of them, the first two rows and half of the third, are the creation of, in other words, the story behind various musicals. The rest cover other great writers of the musical theater like Irving Berlin, Cole Porter, the Gershwins, etc. And I'd like to show you, I will stop this share and I will show you the first minute or two of one of my presentations, so you'll get the idea of what it is I do. This is the opening of my presentation, The Creation of Funny Girl. So here it is.
Listen, I got 36 expressions, sweet as pie to tough as leather.
And a daughter's determination to memorialize her famous mother.
Okay. I will stop the share. In any case, that gives you a little bit of an idea of what I do. And I'd love to present for all of you in New Zealand. And thank you for the opportunity to show you what I do. Thank you, Dan.
Any questions for Charles right off the top? Yeah. Okay. See, I told you his programs are just extraordinary to watch. They're like mini movies. They're awesome. Well done. Okay. Last, certainly not least, my favorite humorist, Andy Greenberg.
Well, thanks, Dan. And first of all, I want to thank Richard so much for not participating in the Best Dressed in Omaha, because had you, I might have come in 5th or 6th place. So thank you for not competing.
You got it, Andy.
With that being said, I'm Andy Greenberg, and I am an author, a former TV talk show host and producer, national radio personality with over 2.5 million listeners per day to my little motivational sessions that I did for the better part of 5.5 years. And my presentation style is engaging. It is interactive. They are educational. They're extremely unique. They're humorous. And everybody always participates. It's not just me babbling for about an hour. The most important thing about those presentations is that everybody walks away feeling good about themselves, about what they learned. And what I've experienced is they actually share it with a lot of other people. So what are some of these presentations? And these are not necessarily in order, but Dan mentioned chocolate. And we actually delve into why people like chocolate and why is chocolate. And I apologize in advance to the women. Men, you might not know this, but why is chocolate an aphrodisiac? What is it that attracts women to chocolate and men? And by the way, there are certain types of chocolate that a man should avoid giving a woman. And ladies, if a man approaches you with chocolate, beware. He might have other alternatives in mind. We also talk about inventions that occurred during the lifetime, all of these new things. And just to show you how inventions have really changed, many of you might not know, but one of the biggest changes ever was the oral thermometer. Forget about the VCR, but for those of us that remember, or you have parents or your associations or your audiences they might remember how temperature used to be taken by the rectal temperature. But now one of the major inventions that changed the world, among so many others, is the oral thermometer, and we cover a whole bunch. We also have a session called How to Deal with Difficult People. Does anybody here know a difficult person?
Yes.
Did you ever think that that difficult person could be you? Another topic that we discuss is something called Say Goodbye to Your Money, meaning how do people influence your mind and make you buy things you never intended to? And we show you a way to prevent that from occurring. We also talk about retirement is hard work and why and how to avoid that. We talk about everybody's famous topic or favorite topic, UFOs, since the beginning of time. We talk about body language. 90% of everything we talk is really represented in the gestures. And how can you tell if a person is lying to you or not? And these are just a sampling of the discussions that we have. Again, every one of them is engaging, interactive, humorous, educational, and most important of all, enjoyable and memorable. So I invite you and your guests and your associations and whomever you represent to join us in one of these magnificent presentations, and hopefully they'll have us back to do others that are also on the list. And Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Andy. Any questions for Andy? No. Okay, good. Allow me now to share with you the rest of the Hudak team of lecturers. Unfortunately, not everyone was able to be here. You are looking at 5, including myself, of 14 lecturers who perform lectures for Hudak on Hollywood. I am going to put right now my email address and a link to Zoom lectures that Hudak on Hollywood offers. The link is to this page here. This page allows me to run through the different lecturers that Hudak on Hollywood has who are ready to go to entertain your members and residents. That's me right there. You already met. Who cares? Here's Erstein, former film and theater critic, Beach Post. He does classic film and Broadway lectures. Sharon Harris, a journalist who lives in New Jersey and Florida. She is more film historian. She takes you all the way back to Hollywood moguls, to the blondes and brunettes of the 1930s in Hollywood. She does deep dives into Gone with the Wind and Casablanca, and she does music of the 1960s lecture well. Leslie Drake, so she's with us right now. Any Jewish communities in Alex Bruner. He is a Harvard MBA who is an expert in Jewish history, Israel, and the Middle East. He is a child of Holocaust survivors from Yugoslavia. Betsy, you already met. Betsy, wonderful, wonderful job. I wish I could sign up and attend more of your lectures. Betsy and I live in Denver, Colorado. Charles, you met. Charles, wonderful job as well. Your presentations are just mind-blowing and how smooth they are, how informative they are, and how visually engaged they are. They're really quite something. So bravo to you, Charles. And Rich, Rich, you take us back. It's a trip down memory lane every time you watch one of our presentations, because these are classic songs, old school pop music songs, but Rich even has ballads from the 30s and 40s, and they're a real treat to listen to, and then get all the behind the scenes information from Rich. So bravo to you as well. Brian Rose. What's that, Rich?
No, I didn't say anything.
Brian Rose is a colleague of ours. He is a former professor at Fordham University in New York City. Brian's specialty is the golden age of television, so American television, if you will, but he also has extensive knowledge in the film industry and film history as well. James Todd is an American history and professor in South Florida. What I think might be James Todd not is, yes, the American history stuff that he can do. He also talks about the Supreme Court in the United States and current politics in the United States. And sometimes I look at what politically in the United States, and I can't imagine how embarrassing or how it may be coming across to the rest of the world. So James could kind of explain all of the craziness happening here in the United States if you are curious about that. Jane Caputi, a professor at Florida Atlantic University in South Florida. She's in women's studies, women's liberation, and pop culture. One of the lectures she does is presidential, a look at pop culture artifacts, the ads and posters and commercials of presidential campaigns here in the United States. Gregory Vecchi, FBI and security expert. He was 30 plus years in law enforcement, formerly with the FBI. He can certainly tell you all about the FBI here in the United States, the major FBI case investigations have gone on, certainly how the United States relates to other countries, including New Zealand. Great choice for that. Marjorie Mark is on a variety of subjects. Perhaps interesting to New Zealanders is her look at the royal in Great Britain. The Got the World, most popular presentation goes from King Henry VIII to Harry in her lecture on the royals. It's something. She also talks extensively about literature. Andy here. Andy will always. So you just met Andy. Surprise you with humor and his depth of knowledge. Learn something new every time you talk to Andy. You met him. So Andy's lecture, many of you smiled as he was telling you all about his lecture. You would love to do more in your future. Miriam Dali is a professor at Florida Atlantic University. She specializes in Jewish history also. So that's it. That's the rundown of what Hudak offer via Zoom. As I mentioned, I put the page that I just showed in the chat, my email address in the chat. I will, of course, include in the follow-up email to everyone when I send Orquídea video that I recorded of our session here today. But I would love to hear from our New Zealand friends, any questions that you may have for us about how to proceed from here, or any questions for anyone here at all.
Kiwis are shy.
Kiwi?
I think I'll ask one question, okay? Because I think this one probably will open the bravery on some people to ask you more questions. So what has been your experience when you are doing these lectures in facilities in the United States? What has been the feedback? And the reason why I'm asking this is because obviously we only get a taste, and I was like, I want to hear more about each one of you, but we obviously don't have the time. But what is the kind of the feedback or the questions that come through when one of you is holding an audience with people living in these retirement villages or care homes?
I'll address that first, and then I'll pass it off to the others. So I'm good, and I know I'm good, and I get invited back. But everyone else, quite frankly, is better. And so I work with them because they get invited back to communities. They not only are really good and really engaging when they're live and in person, but they also are able to field questions because they are subject area experts, as I try to be with classic films as well. So anyone else who would like, please do. But I would wholeheartedly encourage everyone who's on this call and everyone who watches this to book the other 4 Hudak lecturers you're looking at first, and then get around to me later if you're so inclined, because they are that talented and your communities are going to enjoy them that much. So I pass it off to the more talented speakers here. If any of you feel free to chime in.
I'll speak to this subject. My original background in classical music was as an announcer producer in classical radio. And in radio, you have to talk on a set schedule of time. If you say you have 45 seconds, that doesn't mean you have 3.5 minutes. It means you have 45 seconds. It also means you don't get to be in the same room with the people, and you don't even get to look at them. And it was therefore a delight for me when I started giving pre-performance talks at the Symphony Hall and the Opera House to actually get to see people and have them come up and talk to me after my program to ask other comments or just make questions. For example, questions or comments on to the effect of, golly, I thought I really knew everything about La Boheme, but I guess I didn't. I learned more from you, which is really satisfying to get to hear. And I've been getting to do a lot of that with the programs I do at residential centers and senior centers and such for Dan. I did a program just this morning on the subject, which for us in the United States is an easy subject. Star Spangled Sampler was music inspired by 4th of July and patriotism. Not current, new, redefined patriotism, but John Philip Sousa patriotism. And that I managed to talk about Sousa and Copland and Bernstein and have almost everyone in the class come up to me afterward and say, I didn't know that about him. Wow, thank you. That's a blast to get to share some new ideas with people who are already open to a subject, but they want to know more.
Yeah. Andy,
That's amazing.
Andy, go ahead.
So I'll respond by calling it the 3 R's, the 3 R's of a presentation. The first one is repeat. When the host who invited you to begin with wants to book you again as quickly as they possibly can because everybody enjoyed the topic. The second R is referrals. And I'm very pleased to say that about 90% of my current opportunities are from referrals, people calling up and say, I heard of you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the second R. The third R is request. So what does that mean? At the end of a presentation, how many people come up to me afterwards and say, hey, do you have your business card with you? I'd like to get more information and find out what other topics you have in addition to this one. So I call it the 3 R's. The most important one, though, is the S. And the S is the smiles. The smiles on the faces of the audience, the attendees, who really appreciate what the hour they spent. And I end every presentation with the following line. I say, you guys put a smile on my face. I hope I put a smile on yours. And that's the most important thing.
Well done, Andy. Charles, go ahead.
Yeah, I will echo what Betsy and Andy said. It's very gratifying. I have been passionate about musical theater since I was a teenager. And when I discovered 20 years ago that I could tell the stories behind the great shows, it thrilled me. And then I was able to bring my graphic design background to the task. And it's very gratifying to see how thrilled people are by my presentations. And I would love to have the opportunity to do it for your musical theater fans in New Zealand.
Go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, one of the most gratifying things that I've encountered, first live when I was doing most of my programs in that format pre-COVID, and even now with Zoom, is when you have a population, a senior population, people sometimes with memory issues, maybe early onset Alzheimer's or some form of dementia. They may not remember what they had for lunch the day before, or even some of the names of their relatives. But then you play a Cole Porter song or a song by Irving Berlin or something that they grew up with in their childhood. The lyrics, even if they haven't heard them, and I'm sure, Charles, you've had this experience too, it could be decades since they last heard the song, and it comes back to them, they start singing along. And it's just a different part of their memory that is associating with the music, and it's really gratifying. It's like a light goes on behind their eyes, and it's kind of a very unique awakening, very gratifying, both for the audience and certainly for the presenter.
Yes, and Rich, film clips do that as well, but I think music is more powerful and more reliable as a memory trigger than movie or visual images are. So I think you're absolutely right there, for sure. Any other questions for anyone here on the team?
I want to ask a question to our guests. What experiences have you had using Zoom? Do you find it good for the people that you're representing? What concerns do you guys have that we might be able to address, since we're not going to be live for the most part and doing it on Zoom?
Andy, not live in person.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, not live in person, right? But on Zoom. Have you had experience with it? Are there any upsides or downsides that you guys have had? Sounds like a good fit then.
Anyone? Sharon?
I guess it's trying to hold the attention of the audience when you're not actually there in the flesh, so to speak. We have quizzes and Somerset concerts and a Somerset interview every month. And I do find that some people will go to sleep. Just isn't enough to hold their attention.
Thank you. For your informational purposes, most lectures that the Hudak on Hollywood team gives are about an hour, or about 45 minutes to an hour. We found that tends to be about the sweet spot. Charles has some lectures that are an hour and a half. Charles has some that are I think 45 minutes to an hour. So it would be a matter of you telling us what you want and what kind of time frame you're looking for, and we would do everything we can to accommodate. The bottom line is making your residents and members happy, pleasing them, and hopefully doing so well, as Andy pointed out, to be a repeat client of yours in the future.
And I think one of the keys in keeping their attention, as we all do, is making it interactive and engaging, and looking at the screen as you're doing your presentation, or they're watching a clip or listening to music, and see who smiles and see who reacts positively. And then once that piece is over, refer to that person by saying, Sharon, it looks like you really enjoyed that piece. What did it do for you? And keep them engaged that way. So it's reading the audience on Zoom, and of course live also, and getting them to participate and answer. But you got to watch the screen and who's reacting and responding.
Yes, and it depends on how your community is set up. I've had times where I am in a screen in a room and I'm talking from the screen to the people in the room. I've also had times where the Zoom link was sent to each member of the community for them to watch individually. And when that's the case, I can engage in the chat, I can ask questions, I can ask trivia. So the chat is another way to keep people engaged. I ask poll questions. Hey, what's your favorite movie that I discussed today? Things like that can also be done. So we do make a pointed effort to keep the audience as engaged as possible. Jessica.
How about the time frame? Because we all know that we've got different time zones and you guys are only available via Zoom. Will that work? Will New Zealand time frame work for you guys as well?
Yes, absolutely. Evening lectures from home are really nice for us here in the United States. So not all of us like to drive at night. So around noon or a little bit later, your time actually works really well for us. You could, of course, go into the morning, your time. That would work really well for us as well. So ideally for us, you would all somehow, some way get on the same page and say, okay, 10 of us are going to go in and we're all going to have Rich do this lecture at noon on Tuesday the 28th or something like that. And I'll say, okay, Rich, can you do this? Tuesday the 28th at noon in New Zealand is X time for you. And does that work for you? So yes, we would certainly make it work. I would have to ask you the question though as well. Generally speaking, what time of the day works better for lectures for you?
Well, normally our ones, especially we also have a care home. So they interact more in the morning, like around 10:30. That's normally our activity morning time, because that's when everyone's awake and really excited of what's going to happen for the day.
And the morning in New Zealand is late afternoon, evening here. So it's actually in terms
Oh, okay.
absolutely make that work. Yes.
I have a
So,
question. Is there any inclusion criteria for this one? Because we're working in a care center, actually. There are many, the resident, they are not cognitively well oriented. So how does it works like?
For those who might have memory issues, cognitive issues, memory issues, do I understand you correctly?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so what I can only speak for my film lectures. My father has Alzheimer's, and I know that in my father's early stages, I was able to send my father my Zoom lectures that I was doing on classic films and the Oscars, and he really enjoyed them because they were, like we've been talking about, memory triggers. He was able to think back to seeing Some Like It Hot and other classic films, and he was still learning from it and really enjoying it. For my film lectures, though, the advanced cognitive stages, I'll be honest with you, are probably not going to be a great fit. I would guess, and Rich, Charles, please correct me if I'm wrong, that music would connect better with those audiences than my film lectures would. And Betsy, classical music as well could connect better than my film lecture. So I'll go to Rich and Betsy here for those who are facing cognitive issues.
It's been my experience that music does seem to be a good bridge to people who have cognitive issues. And even if they don't specifically recognize the little thing I chose to play right now, they can just sit back and let it wash over them and think, oh, it sounds a little familiar. And it's a nice experience, whether or not it is something they would want to take a test on half an hour from now, that what was this thing we heard? But I do find from reading body language that they're enjoying listening, especially if some of it is music they have a fighting chance to know. And I make a point in my programs to include at least 2/3 of it being things that I'm pretty sure they've heard before.
Makes sense. Yeah. And that's a question that you can always ask us when we schedule the program. Yeah, feel free to specifically ask, is this good for those with advanced cognitive issues, or is this better for those who are still in early stages? And we're happy to address it. We're not going to lie to you about what our programs are and what we're doing. We are well aware that if your residents don't enjoy the programs, that repeat viewing isn't going to happen. And it really behooves us to have this be an ongoing engagement. So it is our 100% priority for your residents to enjoy what we do. And if we don't think it's a good fit, we're going to tell you that, because we don't want to waste your time. We don't want to waste our time with something your residents aren't going to enjoy. So we're not going to be deceptive in any way. We'll be as candid as we can in telling you what the program is when you express those concerns. I want to very quickly point one thing out on this page, and that is under every lecturer who is listed, oh, forget about me, Betsy, under every lecturer who is listed, we have, for a full list of lecturers, go to, click this link, and it'll take you to Betsy's page on the website. And it'll give you a full list of all of the lectures that Betsy offers. If you want her to do the customized lecture on New Zealand classical music, like she said, she can certainly do that as well. Charles's, it may take you forever to get through it because there's so much. but there's a lot of content here on Charles's page, the creation of all of these terrific musicals. When you book Charles, please do ask a question about length, because some of Charles's lectures are an hour and a half and others are an hour. So that will need to be clarified, which ones you're going to want him to do. Obviously here with Rich, there are plenty of cool pop music, early rock and roll ballads, early classic rock and roll, Frank Sinatra, golden age of TV, radio. His love songs lecture, very popular in Valentine's Day, a holiday here in the United States, as an option. And of course, here for Andy, it is such a variety of topics with Andy. It's a treat just to look at the topics for Andy, because he mentioned a number of these, but dealing with difficult people, say goodbye money, but look at how it's spelled, you know, with the spelling there, very clever, raining cats and dogs. So just reading through all the different lecture topics, UFOs, you know, all sorts of fun stuff coming from Andy there. And so last chance for questions, then I'm going to let you all go and actually hopefully eat something during your lunch hour.
Hey, Dan, I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you to everyone. I'm on a site today, so I'm just doing some visits. And I think it's been extraordinary. I've been in the background listening. I think you guys have so much to offer, and hopefully people can contact you directly and they get a chance to see the whole session, which I think it's actually crucial for them to understand how they will be able to utilize it in the best way for the audience in the care centers. So I think we look forward to welcoming you in Aotearoa when you want to come over. So let us know. We have our national conferences in August. So it's August next year. It's going to be in Auckland. So think about it. And I think that's from me. Thank you, and thank you, and thank you. And thank you everyone for attending today. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. Everybody have a great day. I look forward to being in touch with you further in the near future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.